when we were running the, you had a question?
Yeah. So remember the guy who presented his Yelp thing?
Mocha.
Yeah.
So when he exits that program, like, and he wants to like restart it again, in theory, the database should be wiped clean, right? In terms of the CLI app, right? Like, so, like he booked us a Chinese restaurant in Geneva reservation. Cool, we can change that, from his program. If he decides to run that program again in like an hour or so, after he's exited it, the database has been wiped clean, right?
No, not necessarily. If he saved the reservation to the database? Like you guys said, oh, let's look at this restaurant in such and such place, blah blah blah. Set reservation. Once you create that reservation, it's created and it's added to the database. It's saved there. Even if the date is in the past, that reservation will still be saved there. In the past, it's just it's no longer useful. But if we want to see a record of all our previous reservations, we have that record now.
Okay, so he exits the program, and then next time he goes in, if he goes look at view my reservations,
It should still be there, yeah. What won't be there and what changes all the time is when he looks restaurants up from the Yelp API, because he's just getting Yelp API data. That's also something that just exists, and then if you want to save it, you would use Active Record. You need a model to save whatever you want from that thing, from that API. Let's say it came with like a restaurant that had like 100 different types of things, like style, rating, reviews, and we only wanted to save the restaurant name and the address. We could create a new model in our program called restaurant, and that model can just have 2 columns in the table or 2 attributes, and that would be just the name and the address. And we don't need to worry about all that extra information that we got back from the Yelp API. We can just save literally that, and then it's our data now, and it's in our program.
It seems to me that it limits your ability to work with arrays a lot, because you can't have class variables be arrays anymore. And there are like many reasons, like let's say I make a car class and I want color, and most people's cars are one color, but like my car has a black roof and a white body, and I would want to store 2 colors in there, and I wouldn't necessarily want to make an entire class of colors.
Yeah, so there's different ways of dealing with like arrays in those kinds of situations. Like if you only want to give somebody a certain number of selections for the attribute color, you could store that as a constant in your model, like colors, and these are the only colors that you are allowed to choose from this array. But that's a little further down the line. But you can store an array as a constant, but that constant is not being saved to the database. It's just saved in your program as something that you hard code. Like only these colors are allowed to be valid choices for color, essentially.
What if you want to put multiple into like one variable? Like right now we can just make an array and say like car.colors equals array.
Yeah, so there are situations where that might be useful, but there's a lot of workarounds for that kind of stuff too. And there are some cases where what I do is I save a string that's kind of looks like a hash, and then I bring that string back, and then I parse it, and then I turn it back into a hash. So there are some workarounds to do it, but you'd be surprised how often you don't need to do something like that. And maybe it's something as simple as just adding another color attribute if you know that you're only ever going to have up to 2 colors at most, It does get a little hairy if you want to do something a little more complicated, like, it could have 100 colors if we're talking about like some specialty paint job for a car or whatever, but then we'd probably think about the models a little differently and create another model just called colors, so that now the car can have many colors, right? So that's another model instead of just being an attribute of the car. So that's actually the most common workaround, to just create another model, and then you have a many-to-many relationship between the car and the color. Cool. So this is just a regular old Ruby program that we started with the first week. A lot of the things that we did here was we initialized through the initialize method. This is what creates the object to begin with. With active record, sorry about that. With active record, the equivalent to creating a new customer, okay, is literally like we don't have to write this initialize method. We can just do, which is what we would do with this Ruby program too, is C1 equals customer.new, okay, and then we could start adding the attributes to that customer, like C1.name equals Osgood. C1.age equals 18. And that's it. And we don't even need to have this other thing going on here. Active Record does this for us automatically. It keeps track of all the things that we've created, right? So this is, again, this is Active Record. This is how we would create a new customer, and then we would save it finally, C1.save, and that would save it. All right? So we need, and this is given to us, without writing any of this, or this, or this, like Active Record, by just creating our table and creating literally just the model, like we have that. So if we just have one model, we've written all these things already. We've got the all, we've got the initialize, and we have the name and age as the attributes on there. So in a way, we are writing a lot less code, even though we pay for it somewhere else. We have to create a schema now, and we have to do that by creating migration. So as I'm talking about these things, I want you guys to kind of think about the regular Ruby program that we're writing. That is, again, something that's just, it exists for a moment until we restart. And Active Record, which does the same thing, but then it also, once we hit like the .save or .create or .update, it creates a permanent record of that object that we've created. Okay? So some of the things that we were doing here is like to get the oldest customer, we had a self.oldestCustomer method. So this was a class method for a customer, and we essentially had to go through all the customers and then figure out which one was the oldest customers doing this. With Active Record, instead of writing this whole top part over here, all we would need to do is customer.all, and then just write this little section right here. Okay? So we avoid all this extra mumbo jumbo right here. So what I want to do now is I want to actually build out a small application in Active Record, and you guys tell me what domain we want to do. We could do like a one-to-many or many-to-many, whatever it is, but I need give me some suggestions. What? Parking? Parking with what else? So, I know what? Birth certificate and parking?
No, I mean, it's different women.
Oh, okay, so yeah, so parking, car? How about a taxi? If we're thinking about transportation. So we've got a cab driver, a rider, right, or a customer. And then we're gonna make a many-to-many relationship here. We'll go in the middle here. A what? A ride. Perfect. All right, so which way did the chicken feet go? Downward. Okay. So what does that mean? What does this guy gotta have?
Driver and customer.
What are two attributes?
Driver and customer ID.
Driver and customer ID. So D, ID, and C, ID. Okay, cool. So we're gonna build this out, and do we want any attributes for these guys? Let's keep it simple so that we can code this out fairly quickly. So for cab driver, name maybe. Okay. For customer. And for the ride, should we have anything else on there? Date. Car. cost of the ride, so how much
Yeah.
money?
What's
And how about like distance traveled? Yeah. Sorry about my chicken. It's like the chicken feet, chicken scratch, chicken everything. Cool. So, all right. So to keep it simple, we'll do. I feel like these are pretty good for a ride. Like we all kind of keep track of that money and distance, or maybe even just money. And let's build this out. Let's create a brand new project.
Actually,
I'm gonna.
before you go, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I've seen a couple other models, like sometimes car will be outside. Like let's say car is a new class there. And
Car?
then, yeah, let's say class is like car is its own class. So car is linked to ride, but car is also linked to cab driver. Is that possible? Can you have like
A car
is linked to the ride?
is linked to the ride. Okay.
Yeah.
So a ride belongs to a car, and then a car has many rides.
Yep.
Okay.
And then a car belongs to a cab driver.
A car belongs to a cab driver. So,
Can you
so
have
is that a one-to-one relationship then? Yeah. So then what we do is we just get rid of this guy here. Okay. Now the customer, because we can still get to the cab through the ride, and then figure out who the car was that was in the ride, and then from that get down to the cab driver. So it's a couple of more intermediate like dots,
Yeah.
but we can get to that point.
Got it. But circles aren't allowed.
Circles?
Like as in like you had like a line that almost made a circle. That's no good. It seems like. It's
You
like
can do it.
before-
You can do it, yeah, but you just gotta be careful with this relationship that it doesn't interact with this one, where if you do like ride that car or ride that how would it be here? It would be ride that car. So yeah, so the way that this would work is if you're trying to get to cab driver this way, you could do like car.cab, but you could also do like car.ride.cab. So you can kind of have like this circular business going on here. But that sometimes can like kind of fuck up your model a little bit. So you
Yeah.
can do it, but you just gotta be careful with how you do it in certain situations. It's happened to me before where I've had to like erase one of those connections just because it was interfering with another one on the model. April?
Then wouldn't that mean that there's a customer with many car drivers and car drivers with many customers? How do you get from one relationship to the next if there's two models in between them?
Okay, repeat that one more time.
So a customer has many cab drivers,
A customer has many cab drivers, yeah.
and cab drivers has many customers.
Cab driver has many customers, okay.
How do you link the two between each other when there's two different models in between them? Do you go to like customer has many drivers through the ride through the car? Or do you go to like, since there's customers with many cars through rides, then
Well, you would be able to do it in whichever direction you wanted to. Like if you want to get to the cab from the car, the thing is this guy would always need to know about the ride for us to get to car or for us to get to cab driver.
well, say that the cab driver isn't linked to the ride.
Okay. Sorry.
Now you still would have customer has many cab drivers. How do you get to that from ride and car in between them?
So you would do like C1, right, or whatever the customer instance is, and we're gonna get into this a little bit too when we do it. So you would do like C1 dot ride or dot rides, get whatever ride it is that we're looking for, like find by ride ID or find by date and something else. Once we have the ride, we could do ride dot car, and then we would do ride dot car dot cab. So just by chaining on, as long as the relationship is listed correctly, we can go from all the way over here by just saying, okay, customer.ride.car.cab. Obviously, when we have a many relationship, if we have to choose one, like we can't just do like customer.ride, we would have to do like customer1.rides. Whatever ride we want, like first, last, or we could iterate until we find something that matches what we're looking for. And then, once we have that ride, then we can do that ride.car.cab.
So it's like an iteration through an iteration. It's like a nested data structure almost.
Only for the ride. All these other ones, see, this is just a many to one.
Yes.
So we have rides. Once we have the ride, okay, it's just a one-to-one relationship. So from that ride, there's only gonna ever be one car. And then from that car, there's only, because we have a one-to-one relationship here, there's only gonna be one cab driver.
So then you can basically build a method that connects that to, or the customer, to the ride, to the car, to the driver, multiple times in order to have basically a data of customer, not drivers, equaling all the drivers listed.
Yes.
Damn. That's me right now. My fashion models and my designers.
All right. So we're gonna build this out. And bump, 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 bump. What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna do exactly what you guys do. And go here, and go to, where's that project? Module 1 projects, final project guidelines. I'm just gonna open this because it has all the boilerplate that I need. Oh, that's not what I want. And I'm cool, I could just clone it without forking. And okay, cool. So we've got our run file, we've got our config, which sets up our database, and that is pretty much it. So what's the first thing that we want to do when we build this out? We're gonna forget about car in this case. We got cab driver, ride, and customer. So it's the first thing we want to do. Install our gems. I already did that. I did the bundle. Build a table. So how do we do that? Rake DB create migration. Now what does this need as an argument? Name equals, what are we gonna make first? Huh? Driver? Driver. So let's just go ahead and do driver first. When we get to Rails and all this good stuff in the future, you could actually tell it what your attributes are going to be after this, and it'll create the schema file for you. So you're no longer going to have to write that def blah blah blah. I know it's a little bit of extra code that we need to remember, but Rails will help you forget that if you so wanted to.
Before you hit enter, is that correct?
Oh, crate. Thanks. Rake DB crate. Okay.
There's no convention where driver needs to be like create underscore driver or anything like that, right?
Where driver needs to be what?
There's no syntax requirements for this, right? Like you can name that table whatever you want, or is there like you have to say
If you're creating a migration for a table, the table has to be plural.
table has to be
Yeah. Yeah.
But the create file doesn't matter. This file can be named whatever.
Yeah, what you're doing right now.
Oh, the migration, yeah, you call it whatever you want. So I call this drivers, but I could call this like create drivers table or whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm just calling it drivers for simplicity. So what is that? Warning already initialized. It's not a big deal. Cool. So here it is. So we're creating the driver and we want to create a new table. Watch this, guys. Bam! Bam! Wow. So that's a shortcut that I have installed in my, I'll tell you guys what it is right now. Hold on. Live share, Git lens, extensions. So that one is, where are my installed extensions? Okay, I'll slack it out later. Don't worry about it. So I've got the Ruby language support, and there's something else that I have in there, like SolarGraph, which I need to have installed. But anyway, I'll slack that out. Just remind me, because I'll forget. So I think this is good. For the driver, we said we just want a name. Cool. So now what can we do? Rake db migrate. All right, and we should have a schema. We've got development. Where's our schema? Oh shit, what happened here? La, 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 la. Tasks, army, migrate. Oh shit, I made a symbol instead of a string. I made two symbols. Drivers, strings. With Rails later, you could do symbols instead of strings, I guess.
Can I ask a question actually?
Yeah.
Why is there a reason for calling this method change? Like,
Yeah, because we can roll back a migration. So we're saying this is the change, and then it's got to know, okay, so if we roll back, like this was the change for this particular migration, and it tries to reverse that. This is actually a method that was built from another method. Before, they used to be called up and down. So when a migration was up, then you would say, okay, this is what needs to happen. When a migration was down, you would say, okay, destroy table, blah, blah, blah. So now it's smart enough to know that once we create a table, change means like, okay, if we're going in reverse, we're going to destroy the table.
so it's like a convention. That
Yeah. So it's become a little easier now. Instead of having to write two methods, we just have to write one for a migration. Let's run this again. Uh-oh.
That one does have to be like.
Wait, can you? Can you register the def and the def key?
The def what?
The def one, def.
Does your T timestamps need
Oh, I don't have, yeah, I'm sorry. And drivers what? I think it's fine to leave it as a string. Let's see. Anyway, let's try it. Let's see what happens. No bueno. Oh, date. Yeah. Jesus. Sorry, name. Change to end. Oh, I'm missing an end for the class. All right, 5th time's the charm. There it is. All right, so now we have a table with a column called name. All right, and just with that alone now, I'm in run, puts hello world. I'm gonna drop a binding.pry in here. Is it in our environment? Nope. Okay, and just by having that, can you guys see this? Is this big enough? Yeah. Cool guy. Now I can do Ruby run bin and we dropped into this binding.pry, put hello world. So from here, I can already do like driver.all. Uninitialized constant driver. Oh, I don't have a driver model. So let's throw that guy inside of library a driver.rb class driver inherits from active record base. Was it like this? I don't remember the syntax.
It's like
Don't need this? All right.
No, I think you need the version.
Sometimes you do. All right. Cool. So now we have driver.all and there's nothing in there. So we could already start creating drivers if we wanted to. Like we're gonna have a driver dot create name. Seku is our driver today. Osgood, I'm gonna be a driver too. Osgood. Anybody else want to drive? Lewis. And April's gonna drive too. Cool. And okay, we need some people to be passengers too. So. All right, cool. So now if we do driver.all, we should have an array of all those drivers, right? So, and this is all saved in active record. So that what this means is if I shut my program down, I close VS Code, it's gone. I come back. Boop. Whoops. I come back and I run this again. Ruby bin run .rb. And I do driver.all. We still have all that stuff saved. Remember our old programs, every time that we stopped them and we restarted, all this shit was gone. Like, unless you had like a file somewhere of just text that you wrote, that's the only way that we could have saved stuff. Now our stuff is being saved to our SQL database, and it's being, you're gonna hear this term a lot, persisted. We're persisting it to the database. Cool. So we created a driver, and now we want to also create a passenger or a customer. So we're going to create another migration. It's all right, it's just my terminal. And because we went through all that trouble before, we're not going to do that again. And this time it's going to be customer. Everything's still the same. Dope.
Why does like timestamps date into 12? So that's just a thing active record does?
Yeah, so I don't even think I need this next, like I put date here, but I think we could run it without it and it still just creates that for us. Let's try it. Let's see. It's a beautiful thing about programming. You can just try it quickly and hope for the best. Or oh, I gotta migrate. Cool, created the table, and if we look at the schema now, yeah, we still have created at and updated at. So I put date there before because everything was breaking. I was like, what's happening? And it's because I added that def in front of create tables. But yeah, on the date time, you don't need, or the timestamps, you don't need to put like a name for it. It just does this for us. So we can know whenever the object was created, and then anytime that we've made a change to it, we can see the last update. All right, so now we have a customer's model. And again, we're gonna come back to our lib folder, and we're gonna create a customer.rb, and then this driver, we're gonna jack all this, and then we're just gonna, bam, drop it right there, and this is customer. And now if we run this again, not that. We could do customer.all, and now we've got a customer too, right? So, I'm sorry, we have a customer class, but it's empty because we haven't created any customers yet. So if we do customer.create, name, Kelly, you wanna go for a ride somewhere?
Yeah.
All right. Could not find table customers. Did I mess up and I called it customer? Dang it. So, rake db rollback. Okay. And
We did one out. We rolled back.
thank you. And now we come back to our schema. Why are you still there? What happened here?
Needed another end.
On the what?
On the tables.
No.
Does it go away?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should.
It's like a live feed. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh,
I just finished, so I'm still in on.
Developing databases and nothing previous.
Yeah, and then when you do rollbacks, that's equal to 4, it rolls back.
superclass mismatch for class customer. Bum, 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 bum.
You do DB drop all.
Yeah, so, but we already had some drivers, right? I didn't want to do that, but whatever. Even easier, I could just delete this. Delete this. And turn this like this, and this like this. And then run the migrations again. So all I did to just start myself again, I just deleted the database file, SQLite, development of SQLite, and then I deleted the schema because the schema just kind of tells us the way that our database is looking at the moment. And then I'm just going to run rakedb migrate again, and it'll just run those migrations for us from the start, like if they weren't even there. And something happened with the migration again. Man, I really got to fix these error messages because this is something else that I got going on. Create table customers.
You try to drop all of it in migrate? It's a colon between drop and all.
Jesus Christ. Sorry about this, guys. That's what happens when you don't prepare for this. Oh, I didn't have this saved. So you saw a little dot? It was all just not saving the... Still having issues though. The fudge. Class customer, this is just for model. Schema. Customers, name. I'm just gonna get rid of this migration altogether. I'm gonna run that migration again too. So the drivers table created fine. Now we're gonna create a new migration, rakedb. create migration. Ah, I did it again. Call the customer again. What's going on with me? That's right. Customers. There we go. Rake DB migrate.
Well, you have to fill out the customers, you know? There's nothing in there right now.
You're right. That's it. I'm bombing, and then it's getting worse by the minute.
The customers with an S, right?
Yeah. I don't know why I keep forgetting that S there. All right. Yeah, so I mean, I'm glad this is kind of happening too, so you guys can see like how easy it is to fuck all this up. Like, you just forget an S somewhere, and like your program goes to shit. But so now if we go back and run this, we should be able to create both customers and drivers. So I'm going to do driver.all just to see that I get back an empty array. Customer.all. Okay. And finally, what we need is a join table called ride, right? So we're going to exit. We're going to create one final migration. And this is going to be create table rides, and we're going to have an integer, and it's going to be customer ID, and then we're also going to have another one for driver ID, and then we said we wanted a distance. We could maybe make that a float distance, and what else do we want? Cost. Cool. So now we have our associations built out too, but only in the database. So in the model with Active Record, we're going to be able to create these many-to-many relationships by just doing the hasMany method that Stephen Dorian told you guys today. It's just literally, it's a method. So we know that a driver has many. Actually, let me get rid of all that. Has many rides, and a driver has many. What else? Customers. Okay. So again, this might look like magic, but this is just a method, like Steven said earlier, that takes in 2 arguments. And the arguments are separated by a comma. And then this second argument here is just a hash. Okay, so this hasMany is just an Active Record method. And then we have through and rides, and this is a hash, and then this is just the customer that we have. Right, so Rails is just pretty. It has that syntactic sugar for us, and we can get rid of that.
Similar to what April said before, so like if you had cars and it had to go through cars, how would you do that? Just another comma through space cars?
If it had many cars,
Or like if you had to go from customer name to cab, or like this class if you're going from driver to customer name, and it's going through rides and car, how would you put 2 tables there?
you might not have to if you have a relationship with the ride and the cab, because you can still get to the car from the ride, right? Because that's a one-to-one relationship that we set up there.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, I mean, you could throw it in here, but it might jack a couple of things up because we're trying to get the same information. Like when we're trying to hit like .cars, the method might get a little screwy. So I prefer to just have one relationship and then tack it on that way. And then in the model, just create another method that just makes it easier, and I could just have like a string of like dot rides dot car, and then but have in the model when we create it, the method just call like self dot car, so that we can get the car for the ride or whatever it is. It might not be a class method, it might be an instance method the way we want it, but I think that's probably the easiest way to go about it.
Okay.
Is Bruce supposed to have a colon after it?
Is what supposed to have?
As many customers per, is it supposed to have a colon?
Yes, yeah. So this is a hash. This is kind of like this. It's just a second argument, and when you have this colon here, what that means is that this is a symbol. And the old way of writing like Ruby symbols was with the hash rocket, and if you have the symbol in the front like this, you still have to do the hash rocket to rides, right? So this is just a shortcut for writing that for you. Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. All right. So now we set up the driver association. So how would we set up the customer association? Same thing. So we have the method. Remember, this is a method that is given to us by Active Record. And what do we have many of? And what else? Cool. I'm sorry, through cars. Through rides. All right, cool. So then the final association that we have to set up is the ride itself. And this one should be the easiest. Anybody can give me any hints? And I haven't even created it yet. So the first thing we need to do is create a new file. Call it ride.rb. And remember, our model files are always singular. I'm sorry, I keep thinking of car. Active Record. And what do we need here? Customer. I'm sorry, I got my big boss over here. He's making me a little nervous, sitting in and watching. Customer. Yep. So my bomb level has gone up significantly since he walked into the room. So. All right, cool. So we have this relationship set up. So all that stuff that we did in our earlier program with writing all the methods that we needed to create the associations, when we instantiated something, we needed to pass in those two objects. Now, we don't have to write an initialize method. We really haven't written any code like we were writing or how we were used to writing it before when we were developing the supposedly simpler Ruby programs. So this is simpler. It just has more moving parts because we have all this extra code that somebody else wrote for us. Remember what I said earlier, like programs are really very small pieces of code that as you bring those pieces together, that's when they become more sophisticated and more complex. But in reality, if you break all these things down, and if you look at even Active Record at like the smallest details, all it does is very simple things. It does a lot of little simple things to get us to this complicated state that we're in now. So, just keep that in mind when we're looking at all these things. This stuff isn't magic. If you understand at a deep level, it's just a lot of little things happening in the back that somebody else wrote for us, then I think this kind of will make a little bit more sense for everybody. So, awesome. We've created a customer, we've created a driver, and we've created the rides class, and now we can have fun. We can create a whole CLI from our run file. Okay, so what is some of the things that we think we should be like have some sort of login, maybe? Is that something we want to do? No. Yeah? Okay, so let's start. We're going to say puts welcome to Lyft Whiffed
SQL inject, like hackers come in, or is it in the actual SQL itself?
That happens more online on your website if you have a form that doesn't have some sort of SQL protection and somebody like fills out, like, have you ever filled out like contact us?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen anymore. Like, if you find the website that can still get attacked by like a SQL injection, they deserve it. But that's where it happens. Like, it's not really here. Yeah, I mean, you can, but like, who's going to be using your program and doing that kind of stuff? It's more, the internet's really the scary place. Cool. So, puts welcome to, I don't like the name of this. Waft, right? Because that's kind of like lift, kind of. Waft. No? Okay, terrible. What puts, are you a driver or a customer? And we're going to say gets.chomp. And this would be input equals, or how about user type, right? Because user type, it's really what it is. Now we're going to say, great, now we have a user type, and what is your name next, maybe? Now we have the name. So now that we have those two things, what do we think we could do? Go ahead.
No, just a question. So name is going to update that naming field in your table? Like on the back?
No, this is just a temporary variable that we're using so we could save some information from the user's input. So all we want is some user input right now. And with this user input, what I want to do next now, what I think I want to do next, you guys can tell me maybe if you want to do something else, is I want to create a new driver, create or find a driver or a passenger. If it exists, I want to find it. If it doesn't exist, I want to create it. So what can we do to now create a driver with this name or find one? But we do have to do that.
User equals user update, then just push the information that you type in.
So we have a user input, all right? So we have a user type, and what we want to do is we want to check if that user type is either a driver or a customer. So, right, if we want to do if user type equals customer, then we want to do what?
Test the person and checking possible this customer.
Find or create by name, okay, end. So, and I could also do welcome.
That's an active record.
Yeah. So this is we're gonna call it C, and then we're gonna say welcome C.name. Okay, and now this is the object that was created for us that's temporary. Okay, but we found it or created it from the database. Okay, when the program ends, the garbage collector is gonna come around, it's gonna clean up, and it's gonna get rid of this object. When the program starts again and we get a new object like this, we're gonna have a new object ID, but it's still gonna be referring to the same data that we have in our database of that one customer. Okay, so let's try this program out so far. Let's see if we can create a customer through here. So, does anybody have any questions so far? Kelly, you look scared.
I am.
Is this being recorded?
Yes. Expecting end. If
I thought you typed in
RB14. Sorry. oh shit, welcome plus c.name.
It also puts it, right?
Well, it's going to be the return. Oh, it's not going to be the return statement of the program because it's not the last line because we got this binding.pry. Are you a driver or a customer? Customer. What is your name? Who wants to be a customer? Andy? Andy is our new customer. I don't know who Andy is, but sounds like a cool guy. So now if we do customer.all, we've got an Andy that was created for us in there. All right? If I run this program again, if I exit and I run it again, are you a driver or a customer? I'm going to say customer again. What is your name? And I write Andy again. Are we going to have two Andys in the database or one? I have one because we did a find or create by. Okay, so now if I do customer.all, we still have just Andy in there. All right. Now I feel like some of the problems that you guys are having is how to make this a little more dynamic and just not have one big long method in your code. Okay, one of the things that we can do is turn these guys into methods. So this is going to be called the method def welcome. And this is going to be our welcome method. Okay? And all that's going to be in there. And then we're going to do def set customer. And it's going to get a little easier figuring out where you can and can't like break these things up into methods. I would actually do a lot more refactoring than this that I'm doing right now for my own thing. But anyway, so this set customer, because I'm using this user type that was from up here. Okay, and this name that was here. Okay, I'm gonna have to send that information into this set customer function, right, or method, I should say. So what I can do is I can call set customer from here and pass in that user type and name. Okay, and I'm just passing this into this method when I call it. So it needs to be in here too. User type. Does anyone have any questions on what I did there? Never seen it before?
It's just so you don't have to define user type or name again in the next method.
Yeah, essentially. Okay. And I'm going to say else if, so else if, because Ruby's crazy like that. Driver, then, and then this is going to be driver. I'm going to call this guy C also, whatever. So this would be the user. All right, cool. So now we have this broken up into two different methods that do different things. One welcomes our user, the other one sets the customer. And to run this, I just got to call the welcome method. So I just call welcome, and the program should execute exactly the same way as it did before. It's just our code's a little more organized.
It's welcome, like, when you define the method welcome? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So we're going to run this again. Are you a driver or a customer? Should we be a driver this time? What is your name? Okay, cool. So now if we do driver.all, we've got Osgood. If we do customer.all, we have Andy. Okay. We can create more because I'm in a binding prior now. If we want to create more information, we could actually just go ahead and create a ride from here. What do we think? John? You think so? Okay. So how do I do it? Mm-hmm. This is the next thing we're going to create in our command line.
One, comma, one. Can you click on the word table, then we can see the different attributes?
In the schema? So we need a customer ID. Mm-hmm. How do we get this customer ID? Or customer.first, right? Whatever. Let's get crazy. And customer, and what's the other one? Driver?
You can see the different attributes.
Hmm?
You can see the different attributes.
And how do we get this? How do we get the first driver using Active Record? Okay. Cool. Whoa, we did create a ride, but the customer ID and the driver ID came back nil. What happened here? What did we run? Customer.first. Driver ID, driver.first. Ride.create, but there's no customer ID in there. Yes, thank you. Customer.first.id and driver.first.id. Huh? Cool. So when we're messing with the model in the class, it's always going to be singular. So when we do like customer with the big C, that's always going to be singular. When we do driver with the big D, it's going to be singular. So, and our rides for some reason is missing some information. Oh no, it's right there. Distance and cost. Okay, so how do we feel about this so far?
I have a question. What if, like I say, you had a single ride, that's a driver, but multiple customers? How would you do that inside the ride?
A driver has multiple customers in the ride,
Yeah.
so we would need a new model.
New model?
Yeah. So if you want to do like something like lifts, like pool or something like that for the ride, then you would, yeah, a new model would be the way to go.
So we have all the three tables, we did the migration.
Mm-hmm.
Say for a customer, we wanted to add another column. Instead of rolling back all of our data, how would we add a new column to table customer?
Cool. Yeah. So we would just create another migration. Okay, and we'll call it add column to customer, right? So it's right here. And we're going to do add column. And let me get rid of this so we don't see it. And the first thing we need is the table name. So let's get rid of this guy. And then the next thing that we need is the column name. So what do you, last name maybe? I don't know.
So that's adding an attribute.
Yeah. And then the last thing is the data type. Okay, I'm just gonna make sure I got that correct. Table name, column type, column, yep, cool. rake db migrate. And now when we look at our schema, customer has a last name. So if we jump back into and we do customer.first, we now have a last name column with nil.
What about altering existing data?
What do you mean alternating existing data?
Like he wants to change his name to Andy to Andrew.
Okay, so you could do just customer dot find. We know it's one. I could have done first. I'm just using different methods now, so you guys can see if we can do the same thing. Customer dot find dot, and let's say we had it as a variable, c equals customer dot find. I could do c dot update name and Andrew. Okay, and this is another thing that I want you guys to take away. Like, start using the methods that Active Record provides instead of doing like c dot name, which works too. Now it's me. Okay, but I need to save it if I do it this way without using the update method. Okay? Kelly. You look freaked out, man. Come on.
Alright, so we did migrate, we did break, what's seed?
What's what? Seed? Seed is just to create like some starter data. That's all it is. You want to, because let's say I want to, like, I'm continually changing my database, or I mess up my entire program, and like I can't go back to my database. Imagine I had a thing of like 100 test customers and 100 test drivers and 1,000 test rides that I created while I was playing with the app, and like I was used to that. And then all of a sudden my app explodes and I got to start from scratch. If I don't have a seed file, I can't recreate those easily. I'm gonna have to go back and manually create each one of those things. Where if I had a seed file, I could delete this program a million times and just run rake db seed, and or drop the database, I should say a million times, and then run rake db seed, and then I'm gonna get all that data back into the database.
It's like a backup, like a storage?
It's not really a backup. This is only for development and for test stuff, right? When you have production data, when you have real live data, like you're not gonna be making up fake stuff for what? You know, you got real customers. But when we're creating like this stuff for ourselves, we need something so that we can play around with the application. So and that's where we create these seed files so that we have this data, and if you have to drop the database, you can just get all this fake data again by just running rake db seed, and it'll reseed your database. Cool. So let's go back to this run file and figure out how we can create a ride. So what should our app do next? It asks us what we are. It asked us our name. It welcomed us. Sure. So destination or location. Like, how do we create a ride? How do we instantiate a ride? Request, right? So we could do def request ride. Okay, and what is this? What should this have? A user and the driver, right? So for now, I feel like this request ride thing, that's kind of like business logic, right? Like, as a user, as a customer, not a driver, as a customer, I want to be able to create a ride. So, or request a ride. So what we can do is, on the customer model now, we're going to create a method. Okay, and I could do it in the run model too. I want you guys to remember that. You could do this in the run model. You can do this anywhere you want. But for me, I feel like it makes sense to create a ride in the customer's model class. Why? Because the request ride, like it feels like that's something a customer would do. That's not something a driver would do. That's something, you know, that we can call. So now what we do is do ride dot create, and this thing takes two things, right? It takes in a driver ID and a, yep. So when we create things too, if we go back to our rate console, oh shoot. When we create a ride, before I passed in IDs, but I could also pass in entire objects. Customer.first and driver. I think this should work. Nope, I had the same issue the other day. What is the... Yeah, so we're probably better off doing ride.new. I'm sorry. So we could do ride.new, r equals ride.new, and then we could say r.customer, just r.customer equals, and I don't have to put in the customer ID. I could give this an actual customer object. Customer.first. Okay, so now if I do R, which is the ride instance that we just created, we could see that it automatically added that customer ID for us. So now if we want to do a ride, driver ID, we could do r.driver equals driver.first. And what it's going to do is it's going to associate that driver object with this ride. So now if we check the ride again, we have a driver ID. Okay, and then we could start adding all this other stuff further down the line. So let's go back to our customer. So instead of ride.create, which we can do, but let's do ride.new. And you know what? I'm gonna leave ride.create so you guys can see. It's the same thing. Okay, it's just that now it exists in the database without all the other stuff. No, it won't let you because it's gonna say it needs a driver and the customer to exist. Sorry. Yeah. So r.driver, and we're just gonna pick out a random driver for now. Just there's a bunch of drivers around. You request a ride. We're not gonna check the distance or anything, but you could imagine if we were building a bigger app, we'd have more business logic where we do something like this. So r.driver equals driver.all.sample. And it's gonna give me just one of the drivers in there. And then r.customer, what do we think it's gonna be?
Oh wait, so customer
Kelly, why is it self? Because we're in the customer class. Perfect. Cool. All right, so now I can say bloop, bloop, bloop. Where are we? Bloop, bloop, run. If it's a customer, we're just gonna do c.request ride. Okay, and this is going to request a ride for us because the customer model now has this request ride business. Okay, that's going to create a new ride for us. Okay, and then if we want, again, we're just going to put random data in here, and we're going to see that request. Oh, and did I hit save at the end? r.save, And remember, the last thing here is what gets sent back to us. So we want to send back the r.save will be true. We want to send back the ride object. Does that make sense to you guys? Sometimes you guys are going to mess this up. Believe me, you're going to try to do r.save and create a method, but it's not going to work because you're getting back the return value, which is going to be true. So I'm returning r, which is the ride, and now I'm doing c.requestRide, and I could actually create another ride here, r equals c.requestRide, and then just for funsies, distance, we're going to give it a range of like 1 to 10. All right, and all this does is kind of give me a random number between 1 and 10. But again, this is something that you could ask the user for input for. I'm just doing these things quick because for the sake of time. And then r.cost, we're going to do another range. How much should a ride cost? Between like $5 and 20? I hope that works with floats. I'm not sure. And then I'm gonna put I'm gonna return the ride at the end of this. Why not? So we're going to start the program all over again. Are you a driver or are you a customer? We are a customer. What is your name? Doesn't matter, we can create new ones, right? Because we have find or create by. So Jorge is gonna be a customer today. And what happened here? I got kicked out after I typed in Jorge.
Yeah, it says
Ah, user. I'm sorry. All right, so let's do it again. Welcome user.name. And cool. And this is also where you do like a little bit at a time and then you move on to the next thing, because let's say you would have kept coding and wrote another method and then something else. Before you know it, like you wrote a bunch of stuff. If you got an error, you're gonna be like, well, where the hell is the error? I just coded like 100 lines of code. Oh, shoot. It's gonna. We are a.
Can our project return it? Like exit our program? If we don't give it a name?
I expect your projects to be in a loop where like you have options, and then you can, if you hit 1, then you're gonna request a ride. If you hit 2, you're gonna see all your rides. If you hit 3, you're gonna exit. But while you're hitting 1 and 2, like you're still in that loop up until you hit the button 3. So you're gonna ask for input. If the input is not 3, you're gonna keep running that loop. So we stopped here, and what do we want to do? Customer.all. Why is my computer so slow right now? So customer ID 2 is Jorge. So customer.find 2. I'm gonna call this guy J for Jorge. Okay, then I'm gonna do j.rides, and he's got no rides, so our little method didn't work out. Why did it not work out? No, this is this guy. This is the user instance that we created here. And then we have a instance method request ride. What happened when we rolled in? Are you a driver or a customer? Customer. Let's just clear this and run it again. It might be the sample method that I wrote here in the, because this is like an active record collection, it might not like this sample, but what I'm gonna do is I'm going to throw a binding.pry in here, and then while the program's running, I want to stop in here before we stop further down the line. And this is just like a little bit of troubleshooting that we're doing. Are you a customer? Customer. What is your name? Jorge. So we are at that binding pry. I want to see that ride now, what it is. R. Okay, it's got a customer ID and a driver ID. Cool. And it's got an ID of 3, so I don't know why before that didn't show us when we exited. So exit, we're going to drop into the other pry. No? Well, the ride did get created, so we know that's working. R.distance. So let's throw a binding. I also didn't do r.save, right? Because we're just changing attributes. We didn't do update, right? So we got to throw a little r.save in there. So let's run this one more time. And
Update would have been r.update.com or r.update.
what's that?
If you were to do update instead of save, it should be r.update.distance.
You would do update, and then you would put distance, and you would do this, and then you would put whatever the distance is. If you want to put like a fixed distance here, you put like 22. And then there would be no need to do the save method here. All right, so let's give this a whirl. So something happened, but we never jumped into this binding.pry here, or that save. If user type equals customer, we never got this welcome plus customer name too, right? What is your name? Jorge. Set customer, user type, name. We're just not jumping into that function or that method for some reason. So we're in there, user type, customer, name, Jorge. Okay, so why, let's get rid of this guy. We should end up right here in this binding pry. We're having just an issue with the database. Insert into rides, customer ID, driver ID, blah, blah, blah. Customer ID, driver ID, updated. Bin run Ruby RB31. All right, so I think it's this range that I'm trying to put in there, so I'm just gonna put in a fixed number. And I think that's the reason why I was breaking. So the cost is just fixed $9 and the distance is just a fixed $10. I mean 10 miles. Still having an issue.
So that's what I was.
Argument error? Where do you see that? Given one, expected 0 on what? Attribute methods read. Ah. I'm sorry, guys. That was so dumb. So distance, I knew this should work. So I was passing in a argument instead of like an actual value. See this? With the parentheses, it thinks that it's a method. So I just messed that up. And then the costs we're gonna put fixed just because I don't think a float is gonna give us issues. And I wanna wrap this up. No method error, 2F, 2S, we're at. Rollback transaction. There we go. Yeah, so I didn't like the ranges in the back. So let's just see now if we have that ride. So we're right above the R here. And R, there's a ride of distance of 19, a cost of 7, driver ID and customer ID. And you guys can see how we could build this further. You all saw how long this took me. I mean, it's been an hour and like 30 minutes already, an hour and a half. I feel like we got pretty far, but you know, this should take you guys about like a day or half a day of work. Because you know, you're still kind of getting used to all this stuff. If you guys have any questions, for now, how about this? Any questions right now before I ask about any other questions with the projects? Any questions on this that we went over today?
Say at the end of the day, the CFO wants to report of all the rights.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is stored in those SQL tables. How can we is there a print method to get all of the tables?
Yeah, so ride that off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that gives us all the rides. So we could also get rides that just belong to a user. So we could do like, so Jorge set up a few rides now, right? Jorge had an idea of what, 3? Customer.all, Jorge was 2. So we could do customer.find2.rides. And now we have only his rides.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Cool. And then we could do a bunch of other stuff. Like we could actually set this up to request certain drivers, or we could do more logic to only do things for drivers. Like if we added another attribute to the driver that gets updated, like location, we could do something to only get drivers that are within a certain location of where you're at or where you're going. It's a bunch of more interesting things that we can do. But we would have to add extra attributes and make the program a little more complicated. How do we feel about what we went over today? Was this helpful?
Yeah.
Was this more confusing? Okay, cool. Any other questions at all? Anything? Even if you think it's a dumb question, I want to hear them because those are questions that probably other people have too. So.
What was the final fix at the end?
No, it was the I put this in a range like this.
So when you just set it to a concrete number, it worked?
Yeah. And before that, I had these guys as methods. Any other questions?
Since we're talking about CRUD, you went over create, read, update. What if you want to delete one of the ones for Jorge that's on there?
Well, Jorge is only one, but you've got a bunch of rides, and let's say you want to delete a ride. This ride has an ID of 7. Let's find the ride with no distance and no cost. So ID of 6. So we could do ride dot find 6. Oh. And then what do you think we do to delete? Not destroy, that's it. Okay, so it gives us back the ride that we just destroyed, but if I do ride.all again, we're gonna see that 2, 3, 4, 5, bloop, 7, 8, no 6.
Since talking about active record, what other useful active record methods should we know about that we might be able to use? So that like find by or create by actually might save us a lot of code.
Find the create by is, I like it when I doing real user login, because whatever, we just want somebody to be able to play on our app real quickly. So find the create by is a great one. Find and find by. Remember, find will only, you gotta pass it as an ID, and then find by, you could pass in a hash. So you could say like find by name : Jorge. Find by age, whatever. Now find by only returns one instance, so if there's more than one person with the name Jorge, we're only gonna get the first one that it finds. What else? Find the create by, create, new, save. If you have something that has many of something else, like a customer has many rides, with anything else, you can just like shovel in to whatever has the like if a customer has many of one thing, whatever it is, you can shovel things into that customer. So if a customer has many bananas or fruits, let's say, and you're creating a bunch of fruits, you could just shovel in the fruits and it'll associate that fruit with that customer automatically. So whenever you have a model that has many of something else, you can shovel whatever that has many is. So if a customer has many pencils, you can create a bunch of pencil instances and just shovel them into the customer, and it'll automatically link that customer with that pencil instance.
So do you have to adjust the table? So like let's say if a driver had many customers, and then to see all the customers that one driver had for that single ride, would that be possible? Let's say one ride had 2 customers, or whatever.
Use like maximum, minimum, percent, 50%.
Is that what you mean?
No, what I mean is like, let's say if you had a driver who had a single ride, but say 2 customers, how would you do that?
You would need a new model. So we would need a new model to create a many-to-many relationship between ride and customer. Right now, a ride belongs to a customer. But if we could have many customers, what we would need is another guy in the middle here, which would be like ride customer, right? And then the chicken feet will go inward towards the ride customer, and this guy will go this way, right? So we would have many here. That's the only way you can do that. If you want to associate more than one. John, you had a question?
Yeah, I think I know the answer, but the database that we're saving to here is just our computer, right? It's
Yes.
not like some weird.
No, and actually, it's right here. It's this guy. This is development.db. Okay, so it's just a file. Later, we're gonna work with Postgres, and it's an actual program that runs on your computer. We Ruby and Rails and all this on development, it saves it as a SQLite file just because it's easy to get up and running with, and you don't have to install like any other database software. But later we're gonna install Postgres, and in the future, like the database is gonna be somewhere that you're gonna connect to in the internet somewhere. So like if you host something, you're gonna create a database like on Heroku, and then it'll know what to do. You just gotta give it like some sort of connection string, and it'll know how to hook into it.
So that development file gets created automatically once you make a migration? Awesome.
Any other questions?
Somewhere you have to join
How do I add more customers at once?
Like if you're adding two customers to one ride.
So let's say I found the ride, right? I don't have that join model, so, but let's do like ride.first. It's gonna give me a ride, so I'm gonna say like R1 equals ride.first, and then R1 is that ride. I would just do R1, shovel in whatever, customer.first, then I would shovel in customer.second. You don't have to do them chained up like this. You could do like, you could do customer.first, and then after you hit enter, you could do customer.second, or whatever customer. I'm just using first and second just because they're really easy to talk about, but you could do like a find, or if you already have a customer that you want to shovel in there.
Is there a way to quickly sort, order method, right? Just do like, sort all, you do like customer.all.sort, and then tell how to sort it.
Yeah, it's probably better if you know that you want it sorted to sort it with a active record method. I think there's a method called order by, and you can put whatever column, and then you could pass in ascending or descending.
That does a SQL query, right? Basically, like
Yeah.
where you have order, I think where,
Mm-hmm.
does a SQL query.
Yeah, just keep in mind the SQL queries are going to be faster than the active record stuff. I'm sorry, than like iterating through whatever you have. So like, because now you're asking to fetch this whole big thing of data, and then like you're doing some computationally intensive thing, where like SQL is very efficient and like creating queries and like pulling exactly what you need very efficiently. So you guys could sort still, you can do all these other things, but I'm just saying if you can get into the habit of thinking about these other things, it's even better.